The curse. The fire burned low in the stone hearth, its light painting the chamber in restless shadows. The smell of bitter herbs clung to the air, wormwood, dried myrrh, and crushed nightshade. At the center of the chamber stood Serenia, her black hair braided with copper wire, her eyes gleaming as if lit from within. She was a dealer in forgotten spells, daughter of kings and whispers, and tonight her rage would birth something eternal. On the wooden table before her lay a letter, folded once, its edges charred where fire had nearly consumed it. Nearly. Her hand trembled as she traced the ink, the words that had torn her heart apart. "I have tried, Serenia, I truly have. But it is your sister who has captured my soul. Forgive me, though I know you cannot. I cannot marry you when it is she I love. Alaric." Her fiancé, her beloved, her sworn future, stolen by her own blood. The betrayal was unthinkable. It clawed at her, gutted her, filled her veins with venom. And worse, her twin Elenia had no knowledge of the letter, no knowledge of Alaric's weakness, no knowledge that her very presence had lured him away. Elenia was innocent, radiant in her kindness, always so careful not to wound. But innocence meant nothing in the face of Serenia's pain. "Why should she take all that as mine?" Serenia whispered, her voice shaking as she crushed the letter in her hand. "Why should she be beloved while I am abandoned? Let her beauty be her prison. Let her heart be her torment. Let her love bring nothing but ruin." She raised her arms above the fire, chanting words older than kingdoms, words her mother had warned her never to touch. They fell from her lips in a language that wasn't hers, carrying the weight of eternity. The flames surged high, burning green, then blue. A wind rose in the chamber, though no window was open. The herbs scattered, bursting into smoke. "Elenia!" Serenia spat her sister's name like venom. "You will love him, you will always love him. You will search for him across worlds, across lifetimes. And he," her voice cracked, twisted with bitterness, "he will be the end of you, always. Again and again, his hand shall strike you down. You will never escape it." The fire roared so high it seared her skin, but she did not stop. She pressed on, voice rising to a scream. "Until the end of time, you will love your own destroyer." Then silence. The fire collapsed into ash. The air turned cold, and the curse was sealed. The first death. Elenia never knew what her sister had done. She never knew why Alaric's eyes had shifted that night, why his lips whispered her name with such aching devotion. She never knew why, when Serenia discovered them together at last, Alaric's hand shook with violence instead of tenderness. Steel met flesh. Her blood stained the floor. She died in shock, reaching not for her sister, but for the man she loved. And so the curse began. Through the ages, she lived again in a different land, a healer, a warrior, a queen, a servant. Every life she found him, and every life he killed her, sometimes by sword, sometimes by betrayal, sometimes by his own unwilling hand, as if some shadow guided his fate. Each time she remembered too late. Each time she realized the truth only when blood touched her skin and her breath failed. Every end was a mirror of the first. And yet, every time, her heart could not resist him. Because love does not listen to reason, love does not listen to fear. Love listens only to its own burning. The last life. But now the curse neared its end. Elenia was born once more, not as a queen or warrior, but as a mortal woman in a quiet village, a herbalist, tending to her neighbors with warmth and steady hands. She laughed easily, cared deeply, and thought nothing of fate. Until the day she trespassed into the forbidden garden. Until she was dragged before the elven king, Theriel. And though his eyes were cold, though he regarded her kind as insects, when he looked at her, something old stirred in his soul, something familiar, something that made the walls of centuries tremble. the curse was not done with them. Not yet. Chapter 1. The Forbidden Garden. Centuries had passed since Serenyaya first cursed her sister, yet the bitterness of her soul only festered deeper with time. Unlike Elenyaya, who died and was reborn with each cycle, Serenyaya's punishment was stranger. She endured, carried forward through the centuries, as if her hatred itself kept her alive. She was a shadow in history, a queen who poisoned her rivals, a widow whose husbands all died mysteriously, a merchant who sold talismans made of bone and blood. Wherever she lived, darkness followed, cloaked behind charm and beauty. And now, in this age, she had taken root in the human kingdom of Maryland. Maryland was no ordinary realm. Its spired towers reached high into the mist, carved from stone the color of ash. Lanterns lined its avenues with pools of golden light, but shadows seemed to cling stubbornly to every corner, as though daylight itself refused to linger there. Libraries filled with candle smoke and parchment crowded its academies, cloisters draped with ivy-bred philosophers, war strategists, and men of science. It was a kingdom of progress, steam furnaces and blackened glass, laboratories humming with strange new inventions. But it was also a kingdom of secrets, of hushed whispers in dark halls. Dark academia draped itself over Maryland like a cloak. Black velvet, ink-stained hands, marble corridors echoing with debate and ambition. And yet, for all its brilliance, Maryland was fragile. Its expansion pushed against the hidden borders of the elves, against the ancient woods where no human map dared to draw lines. War had nearly come once before. Blood had nearly spilled. The only thing that stayed the edge of the sword was an alliance, one brokered not by armies, but by betrothal. The elven king, Theriel, cold and ageless, had agreed to bind his house to Maryland through a marriage, a fragile thread to keep peace between two worlds, and the bride chosen was none other than Serenya. Serenya, with her beauty untarnished by centuries. Serenya, whose heart had never ceased to drip with envy. The irony delighted her. To be bound to the man who once belonged to her sister, bound in a way Elenia never had been, in a world where Elenia was nothing more than a fragile human woman, too ordinary to ever matter. Yes. This time, Serenya thought, I will win, I will have him, and she will suffer for it again. Elenia reborn. But fate is stubborn, and curses do not break so easily. Elenia had returned once more, though she did not remember her past. She was born to a quiet village, nestled at the very edge of Maryland, a place where stone streets ended and the forest began. Her family were simple folk, healers, gatherers, keepers of herbal knowledge, passed down by word of mouth rather than books. Elenia was warm, quick to smile, gentle in her care. Her cottage always smelled of lavender, thyme, and honey. She stitched poultices for the wounded, brewed teas for coughs, whispered encouragement to mothers in labor. People said her touch was like spring rain on parched soil. But though she was beloved in her village, she lived unaware that her path was not ordinary. She dreamed sometimes of eyes like starlight, of hands that brushed hers before turning cold, of a blade flashing in the dark. She woke each time with her heart racing, with a strange ache in her chest, though she could never name why. It was fate's cruel mercy. She would not remember the curse until it was too late. The Forbidden Garden. One dusky evening, gathering wildflowers along the edge of the woods, Elenia wandered farther than she intended. The forest was hushed here, ancient, its trees vast as towers, their roots twisting like serpents. The air was different, crisper, tinged with something unearthly. Then she saw it. A wall of silver thorns woven in an archway, half hidden by mist. Beyond it, a garden stretched wild and luminous, flowers glowing faintly in the twilight, streams running like threads of crystal. It was beautiful, otherworldly, like stumbling upon a secret left untouched for millennia. Her breath caught. She knew she should turn back. The stories whispered of forbidden places where mortals did not belong, but her healer's heart was drawn forward. Herbs grew here she had never seen before, blooms with petals like firelight, leaves that pulsed faintly as though alive. If she could study them, she might heal ailments no village doctor could touch. So she stepped through. Her foot crossed the boundary, the silver thorns shimmered, and the garden awoke. The ground quivered as if stirred by a breath. The air thickened, heavy with the scent of cedar and rain. From the far side of the garden, something moved. A tall figure draped in silver and black, eyes gleaming like shards of winter stars. His presence bent the very air, made her knees weaken. The Elven King, Thariel. He stood before her with the weight of centuries in his gaze, his face as still and terrible as carved marble. To humans, he was legend. To her, in that moment, he was terror. "You trespass," he said, his voice deep, resonant, cold. "No human sets foot in my garden and lives." Elenia's lips parted, but no words came. She trembled, clutching her basket of herbs like a shield. Death. She had walked into death. Yet something deep, something she could not name, stayed his hand. For though he looked at her as one looks at a fragile insect, there was something else in his eyes. A flicker, a shadow of recognition he did not understand. "Instead of execution," Thariel said at last, voice cutting through the silence, "you will serve 2 years in my halls, at my command. Your life is mine until your debt is paid." And with that, fate bound them again. Chapter 2. The Indifferent King. The elves called his hall Alden Thariel, the House of Silent Stars. It was carved into the living stone of the mountains, spires rising like frozen song, its walls laced with silver veins that shimmered faintly in moonlight. Inside, corridors stretched vast and echoing, their arches carved with runes that pulsed faintly whenever an elf passed by. The air smelled of cedar, iron, and something sharper, magic woven into every stone. Humans had never set foot here until Elenia. First days of servitude. She was given no room of her own, only a pallet near the kitchens, though it was cleaner than any she'd known in her village. Her days were filled with tasks, tending the gardens, preparing tinctures for the healers, learning the elaborate etiquette of the court so she might not embarrass herself when summoned. The elves regarded her with cool disdain. They were taller, their movements precise, their features sharp as cut gems. Where humans stumbled and sweated, elves glided like streams of water. They spoke in measured tones, their expressions distant, as though every moment were beneath them. And yet, they watched, always. Their pale eyes followed her in the halls, some with curiosity, most with contempt. "Clumsy creature," one had murmured when she dropped a jar of star anise powder, the shards scattering across the marble floor. "Her hands are untrained," another scoffed. "Why keep such a liability?" But Elenia did not shrink. She was used to being underestimated. She gathered the shards, swept them clean, and returned to her work with steady hands. When she spoke, it was with warmth, with laughter when others expected silence. She hummed as she worked, whispered encouragement to plants she potted, muttered under her breath when she was frustrated. It was strange, even improper, but it was herself. The Indifferent King. Thariel himself paid her no mind at first. The king of the elves was a figure of iron dignity, tall, shoulders broad beneath black and silver robes, hair pale as frost. His eyes were ageless, reflecting nothing, like pools of still water that swallowed any warmth cast upon them. He carried the weight of centuries, the kind of presence that made others kneel without command. Humans were brief flickers to him, sparks that died before they could burn. He tolerated their existence, but cared nothing for them. So, when Elenia was brought before him in her first days, he looked at her as one might look at a wayward pet. "Do your work," he said, his voice flat as stone. "Do not think this place will bend to you. You are here because of my mercy, not your worth. Fail, and you will not be spared twice." His words struck sharp, but Elenia bowed her head, lips pressed thin to keep from retorting. She wanted to tell him mercy, given with disdain, was no mercy at all. Instead, she swallowed it. She had promised herself long ago that her strength would never come from cruelty, but from enduring, from choosing kindness where others would not. Still, as she left, she muttered under her breath, "What an insufferable peacock!" He heard her. He said nothing, but the faintest twitch of his mouth betrayed that he had. The first spark of curiosity. It was weeks later that Thariel first noticed her. Truly noticed. Elenia had been allowed to tend a section of the outer gardens, lowly work beneath the notice of most elves. The elves prized rare blossoms, luminous trees, flowers that glowed under moonlight, but they scorned the wild herbs and creeping vines that had no beauty, only purpose. Elenia, however, knelt among them with tender hands, speaking softly to the plants, as though they were old friends. She pruned, replanted, mixed their oils and tinctures with skill born of her village life. When one of the elven healers fell ill with a fever no spell could break, she offered a simple tea brewed of willow bark and honey. "Primitive," the healer scoffed. But the fever broke within hours. Word reached Thariel. And though he said nothing, he came himself to the garden one evening, his shadow stretching long over her as she worked. "You speak to the plants," he said, his tone even, but edged with curiosity. Elenia startled, nearly dropping her shears. "Oh, well, yes. They listen better than most people do." The corner of his brow lifted. "They are not people, they are plants." "Perhaps," she admitted, meeting his gaze with a spark of humor. "But they're kinder company. They don't look down on me the way people do." His eyes lingered on her a moment too long before he turned away, his expression unreadable. "Strange creature," he murmured, almost to himself. But that night, when he walked alone through the silent halls, he found himself thinking of the warmth in her voice. Elves and humans. The differences between them became stark as days bled into weeks. Elves prized silence. Elenia filled silence with chatter, with questions, with laughter that spilled from her lips even when no one else joined. Elves ate with ritual, each movement deliberate, polished. Elenia dropped her spoon, smeared ink on her fingers, smudged dirt on her skirts without apology. Elves valued dignity above all. Elenia tripped, stammered, muttered curses when she thought no one was listening. And yet, where humans burned out quickly, fading in the shortness of their years, Elenia glowed. Her warmth did not falter. Her kindness was not a performance, but an instinct, a steady fire that did not waver even under their coldness. Thariel, who had lived so long he thought he had seen everything, found himself watching her. First in irritation, then in curiosity, and, though he would not admit it even to himself, in something dangerously close to wonder. Chapter 3. The First Cracks. The storm came without warning. Winds howled across the mountains, rattling the silver banners of Alden Thariel, driving the court elves indoors. Thunder rolled, shaking even the enchanted spires, and the skies opened in a torrent of icy rain. In the chaos, a woman stumbled into the hidden gates. Cloaked in sodden cloth, her face drawn with desperation, she clutched a child to her breast. The guards barred path instantly, steel glinting in the stormlight. "A human?" one hissed. "No, not a human." His voice cut sharp with disgust. "A half-breed." the words spread like fire, half-breed. It was a sin unspoken, a thing that should not exist, the mingling of elven blood with mortal frailty. And yet the woman's eyes were unmistakably elven, sharp as frost despite the shadows beneath them. She was of the noble line, Theriel's late cousin, who had vanished decades ago, believed lost. Now here she was, gaunt and trembling, holding a child with dark curls plastered to his fevered brow, eyes fluttering half shut. "My lord!" she gasped as she fell to her knees before Theriel, who had come to the gates himself at the commotion. "I beg you, he will die. They cannot help him. None of their magic works. Please!" Her voice broke as she pulled the boy forward. "Please, Theriel, he is all I have left." The king's gaze fell upon the child, and for the first time in centuries, the cold mask cracked. The abomination. Whispers filled the hall when word spread. Some called for the child to be cast out, to let the storm claim what should never have been born. Others demanded silence, that no one must know of this shame, not while the fragile peace with Maryland teetered. Theriel silenced them all with a raised hand. "Bring the boy to the inner chambers," he commanded, his voice harder than steel. And so the boy was placed upon a bed of silken sheets, his body racked with fever, breath shallow. Elven healers gathered, their hands weaving light, their chants echoing in hollow tones. But their magic faltered. Again and again, the glow dimmed against the boy's skin, as if repelled. "He is neither one nor the other," one murmured bitterly. "No elven gift will take root in such a vessel." Hopelessness spread. Some turned away in shame, others in disgust. But not Eleniah. The human doctor. She had been summoned only as a last resort, an afterthought when all else failed. She entered quietly, her skirts damp from the storm, hair clinging in dark tendrils at her temples. Her eyes widened when she saw the child, small, fragile, burning with fever that had eaten at him for days. "Everyone out," she said. The elves stiffened. "You dare command us?" "Yes," she snapped, her usual warmth burning into fire. "Because you are killing him with your pride. Get out!" Gasps echoed. No one spoke to elves this way. No one lived after doing so. But Theriel did not move. He stood by the door, arms crossed, watching. Curious. Testing. And to their shock, the healers obeyed. One by one they filed out, their eyes cold, leaving only the king, the boy, and the human woman. Elenia knelt by the child's side, her hands gentle as she brushed back his damp curls. "Shh, little one," she whispered. "I know it hurts, but you're not leaving this world tonight, not while I have a say in it." She worked quickly, crushing herbs she had gathered earlier, mixing willow bark with feverfew, layering cloths dipped in cool water. She sang softly as she worked, a lullaby from her village, her voice trembling but steady enough to soothe the boy's cries. The room smelled of mint and lavender, sharp against the heaviness of sickness. Theriel said nothing, but he watched everything, the precision of her hands, the quiet ferocity of her care, the way she shielded the boy as if the world itself meant to strike him down. No elf had ever touched the child so tenderly. The crack in the mask. Hours passed, the fever broke, the boy's breathing steadied, his cheeks flushing with the faintest color of life. Elenia slumped forward, exhausted, her head resting on the edge of the bed. Her hands still cupped the boy's small ones, as if she could not bear to let go. And it was then that Theriel saw her, truly saw her, not as a trespasser, not as a clumsy human, not even as a servant, but as something his people had long forgotten how to be, tender, vulnerable, willing to fight with love instead of pride. He approached, silent as shadow, until he stood over her. His gaze lingered on the way she brushed the boy's hair from his forehead, even in sleep, the quiet smile curving her lips, though she was near collapse. "Why?" His voice was low, almost lost in the quiet. She stirred, lifting her head, Why what? Why save him? He is not yours. To my people, he is nothing, less than nothing, an error. Her tired eyes lifted to meet his, and though she was worn, her voice was steady. Because he's a child, because he's alive, because no one should look at him and see a mistake. Something sharp twisted in his chest, a feeling he had buried long ago, when loss had turned his heart to stone. He said nothing, could say nothing. But when he left that room, the echo of her words followed him, and the wall he had built for centuries cracked, if only by a hairline fracture. Chapter 4. The separation, the hollow between them. The boy's fever was gone, but his body remained frail. Each step was a trembling effort, each night a battle to keep his breath steady. Elenya tended him without pause, every waking moment bent toward his survival. For the court, this was an inconvenience they were eager to forget. To them, the child was a shameful blemish on the dignity of the elves, and whispers hissed through the halls like serpents. Why does the king allow it? Let them go back to the human filth they crawled from. It is weakness, sentimentality. Theriel heard them all, yet silenced none. Instead, he came often to the chambers where Elenya worked, though he never admitted why. He told himself it was to observe the boy's condition, to weigh the danger of discovery. But when his eyes lingered too long on the sight of her bent over her work table, hair spilling loose, lips pursed in focus as she ground herbs into paste, he knew he was lying to himself. The summons came on a rain-heavy morning. The Queen Mother's Council demanded the child be taken beyond the borders, hidden in the human lands, before Marilyn discovered his existence. It will undo every fragile thread of diplomacy, the elders argued. If their king learns a half-blood walks among us, he will take it as insult, as mockery. War will follow. Elenya stood before them, clutching the boy's hand. He'll die without my care. Then go with him, one of the elders spat. Take your human medicine with you. This is no place for such impurities. For the first time, Theriel's mask cracked in full view of his court. She will not be cast out like some beggar. His voice was quiet, but the hall trembled with it. Not while she serves under my roof. But the Queen Mother's eyes, ancient, ruthless, met his own, and he knew he could not win this battle without drawing blades against his own blood. So he said nothing more. That night, Elenya packed her satchel in silence. The boy slept peacefully for once, small chest rising and falling in rhythm. And Theriel came. The silent goodbye. He stood in the doorway, tall and cold, yet his eyes betrayed him. For once, there was no disdain, no icy disinterest, only something that burned low and steady, a heat he had no right to feel. You leave at dawn, he said. She glanced up, startled by the softness of his tone. Yes. A long silence stretched between them. The air itself seemed to ache. Finally, she broke it with a whisper. You don't agree with them, do you? No. His jaw tightened. But my word is not absolute, not in matters of shame. Her lips curved in a sad smile. He isn't shame, he's a child. He looked at her then, truly looked, and the force of it rooted her where she stood. You are unlike any human I have known, he murmured, as if the words had clawed their way out against his will. Her breath caught, her heart thundered. But she did not answer, could not answer, because the boy stirred in his sleep, and she turned away, fingers fussing at the blanket. The moment unraveled. When dawn broke, she left. The ache. The forest swallowed her, and with her, the small flame that had kindled in the cold hollows of Theriel's heart. He walked his halls like a shadow, his crown heavy, his throne suddenly emptier than ever before. The taste of herbs lingered in his memory. The faint warmth of her defiance haunted him. Every time he passed the child's chamber and found it empty, it was as though a blade twisted deeper in his chest. Elenya, for her part, found no peace. Days blurred into nights as she cared for the boy in a lonely cottage at the edge of Maryland's wild forests. She told herself she was content, that she was needed here, but at odd hours she would pause in her work, staring into the fire as though she could still feel the weight of his gaze across a chamber. The yearning grew unbearable. Like two stars in orbit, they pulled at each other from afar, always circling, never touching. And though neither spoke it aloud, both knew. This separation was not an end. It was only a pause before the storm. Chapter 5. The Return. The Fracture in the Veil. The boy grew stronger under Elenya's care, but safety was an illusion. Maryland's forests were restless. Soldiers rode the borders under the pretense of patrols, but their eyes searched deeper, hungrier, as though they sensed something hidden. Villagers whispered of strange footprints near the streams, of laughter that wasn't quite human, carried on the wind. The boy's half-elf blood sang too loudly to be concealed. His ears, slightly pointed, delicate, were easily cloaked with a hood, but the way the forest bent toward him, the way animals followed him like shadows, betrayed his secret. One autumn morning, the cottage door splintered under mailed fists. "By decree of the Crown of Maryland," the captain sneered, "the witch and her creature are under arrest." The clash. Elenya fought like a cornered wolf, flinging herbs into the fire so that the smoke burned their lungs, dragging the boy through the back window. But torches swarmed outside, a noose of steel and flame tightening around them. The captain raised his sword, and the forest itself answered. Branches whipped down with the force of whips. Roots tore free from the soil, seizing ankles, crushing bones. Horses screamed as they toppled. And through the chaos, cloaked in storm gray and crowned with starlight, Theriel stepped from the trees. "Release them," he commanded, his voice rolling like thunder. The captain froze, eyes wide with terror, before forcing bravado into his tone. "This is human land." The words never finished. With a flick of Theriel's fingers, the captain's sword shattered into dust. "I tire of humans who mistake arrogance for authority," Theriel said coldly. The reunion. Elenya's heart thundered as she watched him cut through the soldiers, like shadow through firelight. She hadn't seen him in months, and yet, nothing changed. No, everything had changed. When his gaze finally found hers, time stilled. For once, there was no mask of indifference, no veil of cold detachment. His eyes burned with something raw, something he had buried too long. She couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. The boy clutched her hand tighter, and it was only then she realized she was trembling. Theriel extended a hand, not as a king to a subject, but as a man to the one he could no longer deny. "Come back," he said simply. Her lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to tell him how much she had missed the quiet weight of his presence, the strange safety she had felt in his halls. She wanted to scream at him for letting her leave, for making her feel alone in a world that had always hated her. Instead, she placed her hand in his, and the storm inside her broke into silence. The aftermath. They returned to his hidden kingdom under cover of night. The elders whispered in outrage, their venom sharp as ever, but Theriel silenced them with a single look. "She has proven her worth more than any of you," he said, voice ringing across the council chamber. "If Maryland dares strike at us, it will not be because of a child, but because humans are blind to mercy." The boy slept peacefully in chambers, once belonging to Theriel's late cousin. And in the quiet that followed, Elenya found herself standing with him in the garden under silver moonlight. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. He turned to her, eyes shadowed but unyielding. "And leave you to them? I would sooner let my crown burn." Her throat ached. Her chest felt too tight. "You'll start a war," she said softly. His hand brushed against hers, almost but not quite touching. "Perhaps." but I will not lose you." And in that moment, the wall between them shattered. Chapter 6. The Confession. The drumbeat of war. The air itself thickened with omen. Maryland's banners, black as crow feathers, stitched with silver thorns, rose across the borderlands. Scouts brought whispers of siege engines, of fire barrels dragged through the mud. Ravens carried grim tidings to the Elvish Council. Maryland would march before the winter moon. The halls of Theriel's kingdom became a forge of iron and urgency. Elves and mail worked tirelessly, smiths hammering day and night, war counselors bending over maps that stretched like scars across tables of oak. It was a world of clangor and steel. Yet in the midst of this rising storm, Theriel was more unsettled by the silence between himself and Elenaya. She moved through the halls with quiet determination, tending the boy, preparing poultices for wounded soldiers returning from skirmishes. Always busy, always in motion, and yet whenever their eyes met, the air seemed to thicken, as if daring them to speak what neither could keep buried much longer. The weight of the crown. One night, Theriel stood on the high ramparts overlooking his kingdom. Torches burned below like 1,000 watchful eyes. The mountains loomed jagged, their peaks veiled in storm. Elenya found him there, drawn as if by some invisible tether. "You should rest," she said softly. He did not turn. "Rest is for those who do not carry the lives of thousands on their shoulders. Even kings are mortal," she replied gently, stepping beside him. "Even kings may falter." Finally, he looked at her. His eyes were weary, shadowed by years beyond her counting. But in their depths there was also something else, something unguarded. "You see me," he said quietly, almost wonderingly. "Not the crown, not the cold mask. You look, and it is as if I am only a man." Her throat tightened. "And am I wrong to?" "No." His hand clenched on the stone ledge. "But it is dangerous, because when you look at me so, I forget myself. I forget the line between what I must be and what I want." The breaking point. The storm that had brewed between them, months of stolen glances, words unsaid, tension drawn taut as a bowstring, finally snapped. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the faint cedar of his cloak. His voice was rough, torn from somewhere deep. "You are a thorn in my existence," he confessed, "and yet I cannot pull you free. From the moment you trespassed into my garden, I should have ended you. Yet every hour since, I find myself seeking you out, listening for your voice, remembering your defiance, your laughter, your gentleness. It is madness." Her breath caught, tears burning her eyes. "Do you think I do not feel it too? I tried to leave it behind when I left with the boy. I told myself it was nothing, that I was nothing to you. But every night, Theriel, I dreamed of your halls, your voice, the way your silence filled more of me than any words ever could." The air crackled between them, like lightning suspended just before it strikes. He reached finally and caught her hand. His thumb trembled against her skin. "I swore never to love again," he whispered. "It brings only ruin. And yet, here I stand, brought to my knees by a human." She pressed her palm to his chest, feeling the thunder of his heartbeat. Her own voice broke as she answered, "Then let us be ruined together." And for the first time in lifetimes uncounted, the curse binding them gave way to something deeper, an undeniable, inevitable love. The shadow of war. The horns of Maryland blared across the valley the next dawn. Their armies marched like a dark tide, iron glinting under a sky the color of ash. The forest shuddered under their boots. Elvish war drums answered, echoing off the mountain walls, a low and terrible rhythm. Fires blazed on the ramparts. The air was thick with the scent of oil, steel, and fear. Yet, amid the roar of gathering war, Therial and Elenia stood side by side on the battlements. His hand brushed hers in secret, just enough to remind them both. Though kingdoms might burn, they had found each other at last. And this time, neither would let go without a fight. Chapter 7. The tragedy, the curse fulfilled. The valley erupted with fire. Maryland's armies thundered forward in waves of black steel, banners whipping like carrion wings. Siege towers creaked against the sky, flinging stones that shattered against the mountain walls. Arrows rained like locusts, blotting out the dawn. And the elves answered. Silver armor gleamed as their warriors loosed volleys of moon-forged arrows. Enchanted flames split the air, consuming whole ranks. The very trees awoke at Therial's command, roots ripping upward to drag men screaming into the earth. It was war not of mortals, but of legends. And through it all, Elenia moved among the wounded, her hands bloodied, her voice steady. She was no warrior, yet her presence on the field was as vital as any blade. Her herbs, her bandages, her touch. Soldiers fought harder, simply knowing she was there. But the curse had stirred, and it waited. The shadow of betrayal. On the second day, Maryland unleashed its secret weapon. Dark magic stolen, twisted, and repurposed. A shadow figure emerged among the chaos, a sorceress cloaked in midnight, eyes burning like embers. It was her, Elenia's sister, the architect of her curse. The field seemed to buckle at her arrival. Horses reared in terror. Elves staggered as the ground itself grew cold. She smiled when her gaze fell on Elenia, a smile cruel and triumphant. Still clinging to him? Her voice rang across the chaos. Still playing the fool who believes love stronger than fate? Elenia froze, the weight of lifetimes pressing on her chest. Therial stepped between them, sword drawn, voice like thunder. Stay your tongue, witch. You will not touch her. Her sister's laughter rang like shattering glass. O king, you do not yet see. You are her doom. Always were, always will be. And with a gesture, she split the battlefield in two. The breaking point. Maryland's forces surged. Therial fought like a storm embodied, his blade a blur of silver fire. Elenia tried to stay near, tried to hold her ground as soldiers crashed against the elves' defenses. But the curse was in motion. Therial's cousin's child, half human, half elf, was cornered by a squad of Maryland knights. Elenia saw it first. Without hesitation, she ran, slipping past blades, her only thought to protect him. Elenia! Therial's roar broke through the chaos as he cut his way after her. She reached the boy, shoving him behind her, but the soldiers pressed close, their blades descending, and Therial came faster than thought. His sword swept wide, felling the enemy in a single arc. But in the press of chaos, in the blur of motion, in the cruelty of fate, his blade found her. Not deep, not intended. A cut across her side, sharp enough to drop her, cruel enough to spill blood. The world went silent. He froze, his sword clattering to ground. No! Her blood stained his hands as he caught her. Around them, the battle raged, but it was distant now, meaningless. There was only her, trembling, her breath shallow. The confession in blood. Her hand found his cheek, her touch smearing crimson across his skin. It was always you, she whispered, her voice weak but steady. Every life, every world, always you. His chest broke open with grief. I would give up crown, kingdom, eternity itself, if only it would keep you with me. Tears slipped from her eyes, glimmering even through the pain. Then do not let this be the end. Remember me not as the cursed, but as the woman who loved you, fiercely, freely, always. The battlefield blurred. The roar of war became nothing but an echo. And in his arms, she grew still. The fall of the king. When the elves finally broke Marilyn's forces, when the sorceress was driven back screaming into shadow, Theriel did not rise to claim victory. He knelt in the mud, cradling her body, his crown askew, his face a mask of ruin. The soldiers looked on, silent, their triumph hollow. For what was victory, when their king had lost everything worth ruling for? The curse had claimed her once more. And though he was immortal, he felt more mortal than any man who had ever lived. Epilogue. The last promise. The cycle broken. The battlefields lay silent. Smoke curled lazily into the sky, mingling with the dawn light that painted the world in shades of silver and gold. Theriel walked among the ruins, his crown tarnished, his armor streaked with blood. Not just the blood of war, but the blood of love lost. The curse had claimed her again, yet something stirred beneath the grief. A warmth he had not felt in lifetimes. The sacrifice he had made, the hand he had extended to shield her in her final moment, had shifted the threads of fate itself. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the scent of lilacs and herbs, the faintest echo of her presence. A voice, soft, ethereal, almost a memory. Always you. Theriel closed his eyes. He had loved and lost, and yet somehow, somewhere, the universe had granted them a final reprieve. And yet he could not be satisfied. He refused to live a merge life filled with the ghost of a love that spanned generations. For the first time, his eyes leaked tears, a human response that made him chuckle. For even in death, she continued to have such a hold upon him. Staring at his hands, covered in blood, he did the impossible for his people. Plunging his fanghor blade through his heart, he felt his life drained and relished his reunion with his beloved. A new life dawns. When the years passed and the lands healed, the cycle of tragedy paused. Eleniea was reborn, not as a princess, not as a healer in a hidden kingdom, but as the daughter of a humble merchant, her hands skilled in trade, and her heart curious as ever. She grew up surrounded by the scents of spices, the hum of city streets, and the laughter of those who had no knowledge of magic or royalty. And he returned too, not as an immortal king, not as a ruler of elvish lands, but as a master of blades and shadows, hired as her father's bodyguard. Tall, strong, insufferably charming, he walked through her world like a storm wrapped in silk. His smile was cocky, his laugh teasing, and yet in the way he glanced at her, sometimes too long, sometimes with eyes that flickered with something familiar, he betrayed the memory buried deep in his soul. The streets of Market became their battlefield of glances. He mocked her haggling, challenged her bargaining, teased her endlessly, an insufferable playboy masking a heart that still remembered her. She, for her part, felt a strange familiarity in his presence, though she could not place it. Something tugged at her chest when he was near, a warmth in her gut she had never known before. And in their brief, electric moments, the accidental brush of hands, the shared smile over a clever trade, both felt the tug of lifetimes past, the echo of love that had endured beyond death, beyond war, beyond the cruelty of fate. The glimmer of hope. The story closed not with an ending, but with a promise. That even when curses struck deep, when lives were torn apart by fate, love endured. That even in a world where death had claimed her once again, the universe had bent, just slightly, to grant them one final chance. And as Elenia argued with her insufferable bodyguard over the price of silk in the marketplace, and he smirked at her with eyes that knew more than they should, the listener could sense it. The cycle was broken. Their love would no longer be fated for tragedy. Somewhere in the shuffle of coin and spice, of laughter and teasing, two souls who had loved, lost, and endured would meet again, and this time, nothing could tear them apart.